Hi, welcome back. My name is Brian Devine. I'm the math guy at Hamilton Education. And today we're going over the mathematics section on the 301 SAT practice test. So it's coded 301. Let's get into it. Problem one. All right, we're on section 2, module 1, mathematics section. Problem 1. What is 20% of 320? Well, you can put that in a calculator. 0.2 times 320, and you're going to get out, hopefully, the correct answer, 64. So B is the answer. Problem 2 coming. Problem 2. On problem 2, we have that 12x minus 7 equals 17. So which of the following equations is solved by the solution for the equation above? Well, if we look at this tells us then adding 7 to both sides that 12x must be 24. So x would have to equal 2. And if I put 2 in here, that doesn't work. If I put 2 in for x here, that doesn't work. If I put 2 in for x here, that doesn't work, but 4 times 2 is 8. So the answer is D. On to question 3. Question 3. Darnell rented an e-bike for 8 hours and found that the cost of the rental is $12 per hour plus an insurance fee of $30. Which covers the entire time the bike is rented. If he doesn't want to spend more than $90 on the rental, which of the following inequality statements describes Darnell's bike rental budget? So he's spending $12 per hour plus a fixed fee of $30, and he has to be within a budget of $90. So if I take his budget, 90, and I take away the $12 per hour plus the fixed fee, that has to be a positive value. That has to be a positive value in order for him to be within his budget. And if we distribute the minus sign, I've got 90 minus 12h minus 30 has to be greater than or equal to 0. And that's the same as saying 90 minus 12h, 12, has to be greater than or equal to 30 if I add 30 to both sides. And I see that as one of the answers. So I glom onto that one, and B is the answer. Question 4, the function q of x is given as q of x equals x squared minus 16. And for what value of k that is negative does q of k equal 9? So 9 would have to equal k squared minus 16. Or 25 would have to equal k squared. And if I flip that around and take the square root of both sides, k then would have to be either the positive or negative of 5 for that to be true. And so I'm told that k has to be negative. So negative 5 would be my best selection. Negative 5, A, and you're right. Question 5. A regular 20-sided die a different number from 1 through 20 printed on each face. If the die is rolled once, what's the percent probability that a number less than 5 is facing up? And so my successes would be the set. I could get a 1 facing up, a 2, a 3, or a 4. Those are the only numbers in 1 through 20 that are less than 5. Note that this is 4 out of 20, which is equal to 1/5, which I could write as 0.20. which would translate as 20%. So 20% is correct, and A is your answer. Question 6. In question 6, we have that a standardized math test has both multiple choice and free response question. A correct multiple choice answer receives 1 point. Correct free response question receives 4 points. And there are a total of 85 points. There are M multiple choice and F free response. Which of the following inequalities best models the scoring for this test? Well, I'm going to have 1 times the multiple choice that I got correct. And then I can add on 4 times the number of free response that I got correct. And I'm limited by 85 points, so that would be less than or equal to 85. And if I look at that, well, that's the same thing that's in D. So D would be the correct representation. And D is the correct answer, so that's a great coincidence. Question 7. For question 7, we're given 2 triangles, and we're told that triangle ABC is similar to triangle XYZ. Well, what that tells us right away is that angle A is the same measure as angle X, and angle B is the same measure as angle Z, and angle C is the same measure as angle Z. And if AB corresponds to XY, and AC corresponds to XZ, which we can see here, AB, XY, and if we look at AC, that's going to be XZ. And the measure of angle C is 35, and the measure of angle Y is 42. Well, B and Y are the same measure, so that's got to be 42, and Z and C are the same measure, so that's got to be 35 degrees. What's the measure of angle A? Well, the measure of angle A now should be equal to 180 degrees in the whole triangle, 180 minus the sum of 35 and 42. So if I take 77 away from 180, I got 103. So C is the correct answer. Question 8. In question 8, we're given a graph. And we can see that it crosses the x-axis once, twice, then goes across the y-axis, then crosses the x-axis, then touches the x-axis and bounces off. Okay, so that's what we can see. Now, what the question tells us then is that, hey, you know, this function g of x is graphed above, and it's of this form, a 4th degree polynomial. And A, B, C, D, and E are real numbers. For how many integer values of x, when I put it in for g of x, or for x and g of x, will result in an axial intercept. Now, axial means it could be x or y. And I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places, as I mentioned when I came into the problem, where it goes across an axis. So 5 is the answer. C. Question 9. In question 9, Bucky bought a quantity of churros and cheeseburgers for the Hamilton faculty last Friday. And he spent a total of $66 on all the food. And if Bucky's order had a dozen churros and they cost $3 per churro, and he bought a half dozen cheeseburgers, how much did one cheeseburger cost? Well, if you bought a dozen churros at $3 per, it costs $36 for churros. And if I let C be the cost for all the cheeseburgers, then that has to equal $66. So the cost for all the cheeseburgers, taking 36 away from both sides, was $30. And a half dozen, well, that'd be 6 cheeseburgers. So 30 over 6 is going to give me $5 per cheeseburger. So $5 per cheeseburger is the correct answer. Question 10. We're given a quadratic equation, 2d squared minus 20d equals 48. And I want to know what is the non-positive solution to the equation given above. Well, non-positive means negative and not, it just means negative here. So it could be 0 or a negative number. Obviously, 0 won't work if I put it in for D. And so what we're going to do then is, well, write it in a form that we can factor. So take 48 away from both sides. So now the quadratic equals 0. We can actually divide everything by 2. So d squared minus 10d minus 24 has to equal 0. Dividing 0 by 2 doesn't affect it. It's still 0. And this thing can be factored. I want two numbers that multiply to negative 24, but add to negative 10. So it seems like d plus 2, d minus 12 could equal 0. And if I FOIL that out, I get the thing above. And I want the non-positive. So d could be negative 2, and that would be true. And so negative 2 is your answer. Question 11, a single bacterium can divide in 2 every 20 minutes. And if 100,000 of these bacteria are isolated in a growth medium and a timer is started, in how many whole hours will the number of bacteria in that population exceed the initial population by a factor of 500? So if we express this as an exponential inequality, we're going to have that 500 times 100,000, which is going to be 50 million. We have to be greater than it, or equal, that has to be less than or equal to, I should say, and our original population, 100,000 times 2, and 20-minute periods. Well, there's 3 20-minute periods in an hour. So if I let t be the number of 20-minute periods, this would then be t over 3, because then 3 periods would be an hour. In fact, we can see that over here. I'll make a little table. If this is the number of 20-minute periods, and I let then h stand in for the number of hours, then the number of bacteria that we have, let me get a line tool. I'll keep over here on the right, we'll keep a tab. So this would be the long way to do it. The short way would be to answer that inequality, but let me exemplify what we're saying here, is that at time 0, that would be hour 0, we're going to have the number of bacteria. So I'll just say B. And that's going to be 100,000. Then in 1 20-minute period, which is a third of an hour, there'll be 200,000. In 2 20-minute periods, which is 2/3 of an hour, there'll be 400,000. And in 3 20-minute periods, that'd be 1 hour. There'll be 800,000. Well, then 4, 5, and 6 would take me to 2 hours, and that'd be 1,600,000, then 3,200,000, then 6,400,000, 6,400,000. And then 7 would take me to 128,000, or 12,800,000. 8 20-minute periods would take me to 2,560,000, or 25,600,000. And 9 20-minute periods would be 3 hours, and I'd be at 51,200,000, which would be the correct answer, that it would be 9 20-minute periods, which is 3 hours. So 3 would be your friend. Now, over here with the inequality, you could have just done this on a calculator. You would have probably had to zoom, but to make it easier, I could have said that divide both sides by 100,000. 2 to the t over 3 has to be greater than or equal to 500. Or I could have looked at it this way. An even quicker way is that every hour, I went up 8 times the previous hour. You can see that here, that after 6 periods, that's going to be 2 hours, and I went up 8 times. And I went up 8 times again. So I could have looked at, well, when is 8 to the number of hours going to be greater than or equal to 500? I could have looked at it either way. But the table shows us quickly, well, not so quickly, but shows us that the answer is definitely 3 hours. So B is the correct answer. Question 12. Which of the following expressions is equivalent to this sum? And I look at the answers, peek at them, and they're all factored. So I look for common factors in each of these, and I see that each of these I can pull out 5, I can pull out an a cubed, and I can pull out a b to the 4th. And if I take 5a cubed b to the 4th from the first term, I get b squared. And if I take 5a cubed b to the 4th from the second term, I get 2a. Oh, cool. A is the answer. It's right there. Question 13. Both sporting events and concerts take place in 2 of the exhibition halls at a convention center. And according to local fire codes, the capacity allowable for the sporting event hall is 14,500. And the concert venue is allowed to seat 2,500 people. And the inequality 2,500 minus X quantity plus 14,500 minus Y quantity has to be less than or equal to 17,000. And this best models when events at both halls are occurring at the same time, simultaneously. Which of the following statements is the best interpretation of the variable y? Well, note that the variable y is associated with the 14,500, and that is the capacity for the sporting event hall. So it must be the number of people that are seated for an event in the sports hall. So C is the correct answer. Question 14. In question 14, we're given a graph of fir tree growth. And so over time, the diameter of the tree changes. In fact, it looks like it grows in a linear manner. And the graph above shows the relationship between time and the diameter. Oh, okay, just what we see. Which of the equations below correctly states the diameter as a function of time? Well, it's a linear thing, so it involves slope and intercept. And the intercept looks like it's about 10. And the slope, I can see that if I go over 50, then I went up about 20. And so the slope would be 2/5, which is 0.4, and my y-intercept is 10, and y equals mx plus b. I should have y equals 0.4x plus 10. And I do. C is the correct answer. Question 15. The longest distance through ball R, or ball A, pardon me, is 4R. So if this is the profile of ball A, we know that the radius, or pardon me, the diameter is 4R. So there's A. And ball B has a radius that's a factor of 3 greater than that of ball A, which means its diameter is 3 times that as well. So this would be then 12R for ball B. Not pretty balls, but hopefully you get the idea. Now, the basic idea here then is that these are similar figures. All circles are similar figures. And in similar figures, we have this idea that's called LAV, where if we have length is proportional by K, and area then will be proportional by K squared, because we have a length and a width, and volume would be proportional by K cubed. In effect, we went from 1 dimension to 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. So the exponent follows along. Well, here we have the idea that B to A, the lengths are 3 to 1, which means that areas would be in a ratio of 9 to 1. 3 squared to 1 squared. And volumes would be in a ratio of 27 to 1, 3 cubed to 1 cubed. And so C is the correct answer. In question 17, 43 people answered a recent lunchtime poll. How many times do you wash your hands in a week? And the results are organized in the table above. Of all those that responded, 43 people, and you can add up the frequency column and see that adds to 43. What is the greatest number of people that could have answered 6 times a day? Well, if it's 6 times a day, and there's 7 days in a week, this would cancel here, then that's going to mean 42 times a week. And 42 times a week would be in the 40 to 49 category, which means that there were 7 people that responded, could have responded 6 times a day. So 7 is the correct answer. Question 17. In question 17, a circle is centered at the point 210 on an XY coordinate plane. And we know that the point -6, -5 is on the circle. And I have to find the diameter of the circle. And I know that the diameter equals 2 times the radius. And the radius is going to be the distance between the center and a point on the circle. So the radius would be, by the distance formula, the square of the difference of the x coordinates, so -6 minus 2 squared, plus the square of the difference of the y coordinates, so -5 minus 10 squared. And if I stick that in a calculator, I get 17. So 17 is the radius, which tells me that the diameter must be 2 times 17, which is 34. So D is the correct choice. Question 18. Balboa Park in beautiful San Diego, California has an area of about 1.875 square miles. Which of the following is closest to the area of Balboa Park in square meters? Well, it's going to be 1.875 miles squared. And we're going to take that conversion that they gave us, that there are 1609.34 kilometers per mile. And we're going to square the second thing, because that's going to give us square meters, pardon me, per square mile. And so I'm going to stick into a calculator 1.875 times 1609.34 squared. And this will be in square meters. as a unit because the square miles will cancel out. And I get 4.856 times 10 to the 6, which is 4,856,000 square meters. So B is your answer. Question 19. In question 19, the tables above describe two functions of x. They're both called f of x. If it is certain that f of x is a linear function, and so one of them might not be linear. Let's check it out. So if I go up 1, I went up 4 in this one. If I go up 1 more, I went up 8. And that isn't the same slope. So this one isn't linear. But if I go up 1 here, well, I went up 6. If I go up 1 here, I went up 6 more. So for every 1 I move in the x direction, I move up 6. So it does have a slope. And if I look at that, then I should have, well, here's a y-intercept. So y would be 6x plus 4. And then if I evaluate that at 6, well, that's going to be 36 plus 4, which is 40. So B is the correct answer. Question 20. In question 20, we're given P of x equals negative x squared plus 12x minus 12. And this intersects a horizontal line at 2 points, both of which are 8 units distant from each other. And I want to know what would be the value of C in this case. Well, if I look at P of x equals negative x squared plus 12x minus 12, I can graph that thing easily. I can see right away that the axis of symmetry is going to be when x equals 6, negative 12 over 2 times negative 1. And if that's in the middle, and these points are 8 units apart, well, if I go 4 this way and 4 this way, that'll be 8 units apart. And I'll be x equals 2 and x equals 10. I mean, we know that this thing is going to do something like this. And if I go 4 this way and 4 this way, well, these guys here will be 8 units apart. And I know that, well, P of 2, if I stick 2 in there, I'm going to get negative 4 plus 24 minus 12, which equals 8. And if I stick 10 in there, I'm going to get negative 100 plus 120 minus 12, which equals 8. So I must have the line y equals 8 going through the graph at those 2 points. So C would be the correct answer. See, question 21. In question 21, we're given a system of 2 equations, and the system has more than one solution. Well, right away, that means the same line. And we can see that because if I take 4 times this one, I'm going to get 12x minus 16y equals 48. And if I take 16y from both sides of the second equation, I get 12x minus 16y equals 48. Now, if I clean that up, well, I'm going to have the line y equals, I'm going to end up with 3/4 x minus 3 when I put it into y equals mxb form. Or if I put it as x equals 4 times y plus 3 over 3, which I could write as 4y plus 12 over 3, which would be the same thing as 4y over 3 plus 4. Now, why did I do that? Well, I want to be able to look at it this way, is that if I look at the x, does the y that goes with it follow with that rule? And I can see that if I plug in c over 3 for x, I'm not going to get the thing in A. And if I plug c into this one, I'm not going to get the thing for y, because it has minus 4, not plus 4. So I can throw out A and C right away. And then I look at the other two and I think, and I note this. Well, if I put this into here, do I get the same thing? And I don't. But I do note this, that if x equals c over 2, and I plugged it into this thing, then I'm going to get, if y equaled c over 2, then I plugged it into that thing, then I get that x equals 2c over 3 plus 4. So D is the correct answer. Question 22. In question 22, the perimeter of an isosceles trapezoid with base angles of 45 is given as 8 plus 16 root 2 inches. What is the area of the trapezoid in square inches to the nearest whole number if AB has a length of 4? Well, if AB has a length of 4, then CD must also have a length of 4, which explains the 8 part here. And so the sum of BC and AD must be 16 root 2. And if I drop the altitude from B and C, I know something right away. I've got 45, 45, 90 right triangles. And so if the hypotenuse is 4, then we must have that the height of this thing is 2 root 2. And these little chunks right here are 2 root 2 and 2 root 2. And if everything adds up to 16 root 2, then we must have that this is 6 root 2 and this is 6 root 2. Because 6 root 2, 2 root 2, 6 root 2, 2 root 2 would add up to 16 root 2. And I know that the area of a trapezoid is given as 1/2 the sum of the parallel bases times the height. And so here, that's going to be 1/2 of the sum of the parallel bases, which is 16 root 2, times the height, which is 2 root 2. And if I multiply that out, I get 32. So the area of this trapezoid is 32 square units, or inches. Section 2, Module 2, Question 1. For every snow cone that Buddy sells for $2.50, he makes a profit of $1 for his food truck business. Which of the following expressions best describes how much Buddy spends in dollars to sell C snow cones? Well, if profit equals revenue, the stuff you take in minus your cost, well, that means that cost equals revenue minus profit. And so if we look at it that way, then his cost just for one cone is going to be defined as, well, $2.50. Whoops. The revenue minus his profit, which is $1, which means that it cost him $1.50 per cone. So it should be 1.5 per cone. So 1.5C would be his total cost for C cone. And that's the same as 3C over 2. So B is your answer. Let me redo that one. Golly, I'm stupid today, but I'm stupid every day. So retake 2. I feel more comfortable explaining it this way. Let's do it this way. This would be better. Question 2. Byron is a speed reader clocked at an average of 1,800 words per minute. Approximately how many hours would it take Byron to read the Tolstoy novel War and Peace, which contains 87,287 words? And so if I take 587 words and divide it by 1,800 words per minute, the words will cancel, minutes will become the unit because it flips upstairs. And that means it took him 326.27 minutes to read the novel. And we know that there's 60 minutes in an hour. So if I take the number of minutes and I divide it by 60, I get 5.44 hours. So it would take him 5.44 hours to read the entire novel at that rate. C is your answer. Question 3. In question 3, we're given a system of linear equations, and it has a solution at the point AB. So if I take A in for X, I'm going to get that for A equals 16, which tells me that A equals 4. So I know that A is 4. And if I take that and plug it into the second equation, I'm going to get negative 8 equals 8 minus Y, which tells me right away that Y has to be 8 plus 8, because I can add Y and add 8 to both sides. So Y equals 16, which means that B is 16. And we want B minus A. So B minus A, 16 minus 4 would be 12. So A is the correct answer. Question 4. In question 4, we're given an equation that A of t equals 32 minus 1.75t. And this is the acceleration of a projectile in meters per second as a function of t seconds. We want to know, what's the acceleration of the projectile when t equals 8? So we want A of 8, A sub d, which is going to be 32 minus 1.75 times 8. In a calculator, comes out as 18. So I trust it. You trust it. 18 is the answer, B. Question 5. In right triangle ABC, which we see drawn above, A is 16, B is 30. Which of the following would be the value of C? Well, I know for a fact that we could use the Pythagorean theorem that C has to equal the square root of 16 squared plus 30 squared, which I could write as the square root of 2 squared times 8 squared plus 15 squared, because 16 squared would be 2 squared times squared, because 16 is 2 minus times 8, and 30 squared could be written as 2 squared times 15 squared, because 30 is 2 times 15. Well, the 2 squared, if I take the square root of that, that's going to just come outside as a 2, and I'm going to be left with 8 squared plus 15 squared in the radical. And that matches up with D. So D is the correct answer. Question 6. What real value or values solve the equation above? Well, I'm going to multiply both sides by 3/7 right away. If I take the whole thing and multiply by 3/7, I get rid of the fraction part on the left, and I can see that it's going to be an integer value on the right. So I'm going to end up with 3 plus D on the left, and 3/7 of 21 would be 9. So 3 plus 9, which means that D has to be 6. And 6 is the answer. Question 7. In question 7, what is the y value of the x-intercept? Y value of the x-intercept. Well, it looks like the x-intercept is at -2, 0. And the y value of that is 0. So C would be your correct answer. Question 8. If the function y equals the quantity x plus 2 squared plus 2 is graphed in the xy plane, so you could stick that right into Desmos or your calculator, what is the sum of the coordinates at the point of the y-intercept? Well, if I were to clean that up, FOIL out the x plus 2, I'm going to get y equals x squared plus 4x plus 4 plus 2, which is x squared plus 4x plus 6. And the y-intercept is when x equals 0. And so I can see right away that the y-intercept would be at the point 0, 6. And 0, 6 is going to be 6. So D is the correct answer. Question 9. In question 9, the function g of x equals 4x cubed plus 5x squared minus 7 is translated up 5 units to form some new function h of x. So we know right away that h of x is going to be g of x moved up 5. Or better yet, h of x has to be 4x cubed plus 5x squared minus 7 plus 5. And so if we add those together, that equals -2. And I see that answer right here. D is the correct choice. Question 10. In question 10, we're given what looks like a system. In fact, it says it right here, which coordinate pair NM below solves the system of equations above. So you could always plug it in. I mean, that would be easy to do, but you can see something right away that N has to be 30 minus 12, which is 18. So it's not going to be A and it's not going to be C. And if N is 18, well, I can stick that into the second one, and 18 over 3 is 6. So 6 plus 2 squared has to equal 2 times M. So 8 squared has to equal 2 times M. So 64 equals 2M, then M has got to be 32. And B is the correct answer. For question 11, what expression below is equivalent to the sum of these two ugly things? Well, let's take the two ugly things and write them out like we would multi-digit numbers in elementary school. I'm going to put the 5th degree thing there in the first one, then the 4th degree thing there. And then I've got plus 2 of these 3rd degrees, then minus well, do I got a square in the other one? No, 2A. And then I've got plus 5. And then I'm going to line up the stuff in the second one underneath. So I'm going to end up putting 2A to the 5th there and 3A cubed there. And then plus 7A there and plus 2 there. and then add them up. So I'm going to have 5a to the 5th plus a to the 4th plus 3 plus 2 is 5a cubed, 7 minus 2 plus 5a, 5 plus 2 plus 7. So it's got to be a plus 7, and I can see that, well, B matches up with it beautifully. So B is the correct answer. Question 12. We're given two lines. It says A and B. The two lines are parallel, and they're cut by a transversal. So the transversal is the thing that goes across both parallel lines. And I want to know what is the degree measure of the angle that is supplementary, adds up to 180, with the angle labeled 8x minus 4. Well, I do know that these two are congruent because they're alternate interior angles formed by a transversal across parallel lines. So I know that 8x minus 4 equals 60, which means that 8x equals 64. So x has got to be 8. I'm going to start this one over. Let me redo this one. So take 2 on 12. Better yet, let me erase and then take 2. Here we go. Question 12. In question 12, the figure above has two lines that are parallel, A and B, and they're cut by a transversal, which is a line that goes across both of them. And I want to know the degree measure of the angle that's supplementary to the one labeled 8x minus 4, which is going to be this one right here. The one right there. It's going to add to 180. Well, I already know that 8x minus 4 equals 60, so this has to be 120 because they have to add to 180. That's what supplementary means. Or I could have said, hey, if this one's 60 and this one is supplementary to that, then these two got to add to 180 because they're same side interior formed by a transversal across parallel lines. But either way, my answer is still going to be 120. Question 13. What is the mean, the arithmetic average, of the first 11 odd integers? Well, that's going to be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, up to 21. You can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And we add them all up, divide by 11. Well, that's easy to do, but here's a fact, is that if we look at an arithmetic sequence, and this is because the common difference is 2. So if we look at that idea of an arithmetic sequence, well, here's a neat thing, is that the mean of an arithmetic sequence is equal to the median of an arithmetic sequence. And the number in the middle here is 11. I go in to the 6th one this way or the 6th one that way, the one that's physically in the middle. And so 11 is the answer. Module 2, number 14. In Module 2, number 14, we have scientists studying global climate change have documented that a certain lichen population in Greenland has been expanding by 0.8% every year. And so it's going up 1% every time unit, which means exponential. And I already said it's going up, so it has to be increasing. In fact, we could look at that idea here, that the amount at time t is going to have to be our initial amount, which I'll call p, and that would be 1 plus 0.0086, which is greater than 1, and that would be to time. So for every year we go up 0.86%. So an exponential model with a rate greater than 1. D is the correct answer. Question 15. Which of the given choices is equivalent to p to the exponent 13 over 91? Well, note that 13 over 91 is 1 over 7, which means that this is equivalent to the 7th root of p, which is C. And C rhymes with C, which is Spanish and Italian for yes. Question 16. Jimmy is taking an online guitar course. The course fees include a one-time charge of $39.95 for the first lesson and the materials, and a $5.95 fee from the second lesson on for every additional lesson and materials. And he wants to work at his own pace and take as many of the 36 lessons as he can within his budget of $200. What's the maximum number of lessons he can afford? Well, if it costs $39.95 for the first lesson and materials, and then $5.95 for all the other lessons, well, what if I let L equal the number of lessons that he can take? Then $5.95 is times L minus 1, because he already paid for the first lesson, and it's $5.95 for all the lessons after that. And this has to be within his budget, so that has to be less than or equal to $200. Now, if I clean that up, I'm going to get 5.95 L plus $39.95 minus 5.95 is 34. And that's got to be less than or equal to $200. If I solve for L, I get L has to be less than or equal to 200 minus 34 divided by 5.95 per lesson. And that's going to equal, what is it, 27.9. And since he can't take partial lessons, the most he can take is 27 lessons. And Jimmy can play. Question 17. If 8 plus the absolute value of the quantity 5x minus 10 is equal to 83, what is the non-negative value? Well, we saw non-positive in a question early on, so this has got to mean positive. And we want to make sure it's x plus 2. X plus 2. Well, how can I solve this? I can take 8 away from both sides, and I'm going to get the absolute value of 5x minus 10 is going to be equal to 75. And I can look at that as, well, let's take the bars off and see what happens. That's got to be equal to 75. So 5x has to be equal to 85, and x would be equal to 17, which tells me right away that's positive. That's not negative. And x plus 2 would have to be 19, which is the answer. Question 18. A cube is surrounded by a sphere such that each vertex of the cube is touching distinct points, different points on the sphere. So think of it as a box that's inside of a ball. See if I can effectively draw that. So let me put the box, I'll make the box green. It's touching at all its vertices, back there, over here, down yonder, over there, and then back in the back there. Now, know something about that if we look at the main diagonal through the cube, that's going through the middle of the cube, well, that's going to be the diameter of the sphere that will go through the center. And so this radius is 8 root 3. So this would be 16 root 3 is the diagonal of the cube. And this tells me that the edge length of the cube is 16. So I need that to find the volume of the cube. Remember that the volume of the sphere is going to be 4/3 pi times the radius cubed. And that the volume of the cube is going to be the edge length cubed. And we want to know, hey, what gives the ratio of the volume of the space inside the sphere, but outside the cube, to the volume of the space inside the sphere and inside the cube, which is a goofy way of saying, take the volume of the sphere, so 4/3 pi times 8 root 3 cubed, and take away the cube, 16 cubed. That's going to be the space outside the cube, but inside the sphere, and then divide that then by 16 cubed, the volume of the cube, which is the volume inside the cube and inside the sphere. Okay, cool. So we've got it all set up. Now all we got to do is clean it up. Now, after we, go through some a little bit of work, well, we can cube the 8 root 3, and let's do that first. So I'm going to have 4/3 times pi times 8 cubed times 3 root 3, and that's going to be minus the 16 cubed. And that's all going to be over 16 cubed. Now, this 3 here will cancel out that 3 there. And if we look at the fact that we can rewrite 16 as 8 cubed times 2 cubed, then this thing is going to be, well, I can cancel out an 8 cubed in that thing. And I'm going to end up with 4 pi root 3 over 8 minus 16 cubed over 16 cubed. Because this thing on the bottom, when we look at it with respect to this fraction, is just going to be 8, and then the 16 squared is still under, or 16 cubed is still under the 16 cubed. This then will factor 1 and 2, and I'll get pi root 3 over 2 minus 1, which is A. Question 19. How much area in square units does the circle with the equation x squared plus y squared minus 10x minus 6y plus 18 equals 0 encompass? Well, we're probably going to have to complete the square here to find the radius, because we're comparing it to the general equation for a circle. A circle centered at HK with radius R would conform to that general equation. So I'm going to group the X stuff and group the Y stuff. And I'm going to move the 18 over to the other side by subtracting it from both sides. Then I'm going to complete the square on both group sets. So I'm going to take half of negative 10 and square it, add that. So I got to add 25 to both sides. And I'm going to take half of negative 3 and square it, but I got to add that to both sides. Now, when I do that, I'm going to get x minus 5 squared plus y minus 3 squared, because I built these to be perfect squares. And by balancing out the equation, well, negative 18 plus 25 plus 9 is going to equal 16. So the radius equals 4. And the area that the circle encompasses would be pi times 4 squared, which is 16 pi, which is C. Number 20. Research has shown that a mature modern-day North American male woodchuck, the Marmota monax, I'm calling money, can chuck on average 391.924 cubic centimeters of wood in one sustained 4-hour period of chucking. And based on detailed fossil evidence, the Miocene ancestors of this North American woodchuck, the Marmota chililata chupacabra, I'm going to call them money and chupacabra, could chuck wood at a rate estimated at 442.874 cubic centimeters in a comparable sustained chuck time. And I want to know, well, the question wants to know, what was the percent change in chucking rate between current and prehistoric species? Now, I'm going to use what's called the percent change formula. And in this instance, it's going to be the past rate minus the present rate divided by the present rate times 100, because that'll give me a decimal. And if it's positive, it went up. If it's negative, it went down. But basically, we just want to look for the percent change. And this would be reported as a percent. So if I looked at that, I'm going to take the 442,874 minus 391,924 and divide that by 391.924. And if I put that in my calculator, I get a change of 13%. 13% change. So B is the correct answer. I look at this thing and there's no numbers. It looks scary, but I want to show you that this is actually a pretty easy idea that's written in a really goofy way. First off, they said what must be true about these lines, and they said it's a system. And that when we graph these two lines as they're shown, they form a right angle at some point JK. Now, there's two things that we want to notice right away. Well, first, I can rewrite these lines and see their slope. The first one would come out to be y equals negative a over b times x plus c over b. And the second line would be y equals negative m over n times x plus p over n. Now, these lines have to be perpendicular. And so if they're perpendicular, immediately that implies opposite reciprocal. And so we must have then that negative a over b equals the opposite reciprocal of the slope of the second line, which would be n over m. Or, I don't see that right away, but I do know that if I multiply both sides by negative 1, I'm going to get this. And right away, I know it's not going to be A, it's not going to be C. So I can eliminate two answers right away because this is a fact, must be true if they're perpendicular. The other part of it, well, second, if these two lines intersect, they equal the same y value at that point. So the two lines got to be equal. So I have negative a over b times x plus c over b has to equal negative m over n times x plus p over n at that point of intersection. Well, that's going to lead me to the fact that, well, I can even stick in J and K right now. So let's make this X thing a J. So this is going to be J now in our solution because the K's would be the same. And if I clean that up, I'm going to get M over N minus A over B times J has to equal P over N minus C over B, which means, well, let's clean that up even more. I'd have BM minus AN over BN times J has to equal BP minus CN over BN. Now, if I multiply both sides by the reciprocal of the fraction that is in front of J, well, I'm going to end up with J now is going to equal BP minus CN over BN, and that's over BM minus AN over BN. And I can turn that into a multiplication by reciprocal, and I'm going to end up with the fact that J has to be BP minus CN over BM minus AN, which eliminates B and puts me on to D as the correct answer. Now, was that a hard problem? Heck yeah. Suck it up. It could happen. I hope you got it right. Question 22. If a function f of x is defined as a product of two linear factors, and it has a set of solutions that are non-real. Well, non-real means then it's complex, which means that we have some quadratic that never touches the x-axis. It's still going to have zeros. In fact, we can write it with linear factors. I can write it as x minus some complex thing times x minus the conjugate of that complex thing. And that would equal 0, would be the form that you want to be aware of. And since these are only complex numbers, then we're going to have no real solutions. And your answer is 0.